Well, first off, when those lines are down, customers are without electricity. That means there is disruption in your service. You're not providing the service to your customers. So you will be receiving calls from them to your customer service departments. And at that same time, while you're taking all those calls, your organization, you need to get a response team out there ASAP. Inform the customers that, one, you're aware so you can slow down those calls, and that you're working on the problem. So with any event, like I had said, there are numerous different notifications that have to go out to numerous groups at different times. And it is key to make sure you're sending the right message to the right group at the right time. So, looking at a power outage without going to each individual group, if you look at what you'd send to an employee or response team, the first thing you're going to have to let them know is the outage is out. We need someone to identify the root cause, figure this out, what's going on. Once you figure out what's going on, then simultaneously, you need to be able to send those messages to customers and the media saying, hey, this is going to be affecting X amount of people, and this is how long, and this is where it's affecting. And then after that, you have to simultaneously send your second notification or third notification telling, what the root cause is to your response teams, letting customers know how many hours you're expected for this outage to last, and the same thing to the media. And then obviously once you get to there could be 2 or 3 more messages in between notification 2 and the third one we have, but for the case of simplicity for this presentation, once you get to the conclusion, you need to let everyone know so they're not waiting for you or unsure of when this service disruption has ended. The same goes with the boil water order. If you have a water test that comes back contaminated for a certain area, that area needs to know, and they need to know what to do and what it's contaminated with. So they need these instructions to be aware of the situation. And your team, just like a power outage, they need to respond as soon as possible. As in the case with, the power outage, you're not just sending one blanket statement for the entire life cycle of the event. Each group is going to have catered messages that are sent to them. In the case of, for the media, you're going to have to let them know that this advisory has been issued due to a loss of water pressure in your system affecting, X amount of customers. Once you figure it out, you're going to have to let them know so they can spread the message for you and other people in those areas. Then an advisory has been identified and crews are working on it, and here's where the issue is. So people are aware that in those areas and what they need to do. Additionally, at the end of it, with any group, you need to let them know that this has ended. The water boil order has been lifted. You can resume. Here's some instructions on what you need to do with your plumbing if that's needed, and you can resume ordinary use. The key is communication, and what we try and do with scenario managers, and this is an oversimplification of it, of course, but really create a simplified process for you guys to get messages out when these critical and high stress situations are coming together, and you have to send out all these notifications. You're not just sending out one. You're sending out, in this case, 9, and this is an oversimplified event. In most events, you might be sending a couple dozen to these, maybe 3 or 4 to customers, 2 dozen to employees, and for a certain situation, and then to the media, maybe 2 or 3. But the point is, you're not just sending one message. And this is a high stress situation where you need to make sure you're on point and sending the right message. So with that, I want to hand it over to our senior sales engineer, Mike Wallach, to give you guys a real inside look at a high level of the actual product itself, Scenario Manager. Mike, handing it over. When you're ready, you may begin.
All right, thanks, Mike. It works out well that we're both Mikes. So good day, everyone. I'm going to really go through the Scenario Manager and implement pretty closely those couple of slides that Mike had showed you. And I've done this on purpose. I didn't want to do something really generic because that's not very meaningful, but I also wanted to keep it simple. And really the biggest thing that I want to focus on here really is the mechanics and the workflow, not so much the content, right? Of course, you'll each have your own way that you say things. You'll have your own acronyms and things like that. So that's what I wanted to focus on. So here we have I have my utility dispatcher with my incidents. And let's say we have a power outage, so we need to start our power outage scenario is the one I'm going to talk about. So I want to launch an incident, and we see here I have the individual incident templates, more for illustration in this case. It was really illustrating for these two different incident types the three general audiences that are in play for this, right? Customers, employees, and the media. I have these just for reference. The idea here, of course, is we have our scenarios. We package these up into one object, so the power outage. And the beauty of this is now we have, from the dispatcher's perspective, I have to launch a new incident. I have a single interface, right? For a new power outage, here's three pieces of information that I need to provide that will drive the messaging in these three different incident templates. And I'll show you the back end of this, of course, as well. So we have really our customer version of the message, in this case is what I'm calling it. We have some details that are going to be given for the media and employees, and then we have how many people are affected at the moment as far as we know, right? And I put some tooltips on here, things like, approximate number of customers affected by the outage in this case. So I fill this information out, and I want to launch my message. So what that's done, for those of you that are familiar with incident communications, we have an open incident now in Everbridge. That hasn't changed. But because I've launched that from a scenario, what we have here now is my three different messages to my three different audiences all get sent at the same time through that single set of inputs. So if we look at this first one here as an example, here is, again, very simple, right? And I did that on purpose, but here is our customer notification. We're experiencing an outage, and we'll let you know when we have a resolution. Now, that's not probably realistic to send to actual customers, but this is just an example, right? I've also then notified some employees. Hey, this outage is out. Go, guys, figure out what the problem is. We've got about 1,000 people we think are affected by this. And this typically, I've used a static group in this case as an example, but this is where you might tie in something like an on-call schedule or something like that. You don't necessarily want to tell every employee. You want to tell the employees that are going to actually be able to do something about the problem. So that's where you can build things like that in. And then the third message I sent, again, very simple, is something you might send to the media, right? We're having an outage. We think there's about 1,000 people affected. We're just letting you know, go put it on the news or something like that, right? Granted, these are very, very simple examples, but it really makes the job of the dispatcher very simple. They fill in one set of information and send the message. But also it allows you to have that very tight control and structure around your messaging, right? And I'll tell you, and I'll illustrate that in a little more detail when I show you on the back end how you might set this up. But I want to run through this from the dispatcher's perspective before I get into that. So we sent our initial message, great, and now we'll say 30 or 60 minutes has gone by, something like that. We need to send an update. So just like for those of you that use incident communications today, just like you an updated incident, we're going to do the same here. But of course, we're updating our scenario. So now I have it set up, well, so we have an outage. We've identified the root cause, and I guessed, and I was close. Mike said a tree fell, and I said a vehicle struck a power pole. And we're going to want to get an estimated time to resolution. So we think we'll have it fixed in about 4 hours. I just want 4 is all I want to put in there. Now again, same three messages to the three different audiences. I want to let my customers know, okay, we figured it out. We expect it to be restored in approximately 4 hours, so we can get that message to our customers. Same thing with employees, perhaps maybe a different set of employees. Maybe that first set of employees was linemen. They're going to fix the problem, perhaps. And now in the update, the target audience maybe is management, so they're aware, or something like that, right? So not only is it internal versus external, like employees versus customers, but it could be different people internally as well, depending on the situation. And then we've also sent a similar message to the media, so to speak, where we think we'll have everything restored in 4 hours. So subtle differences in this case, because like I said, we're not really focusing on the content so much. But there's a lot of power in this, is that you can be very specific and have very tailored, detailed messages for those different audiences, right, out of that common set of inputs. That's really the power of this. And of course, to cap this off, right? We want to tell people once it's been completed, right, it's over, it's been restored, things like that. And similarly, right here we have sort of our external version of the message and the internal version of the message. In this case, it's almost the same, but just allows you to have those different details for those different audiences and have control over that. And so we can do that as well. And again, so we see in this case very simple: three new, 3 updated, 3 resolved, and we can follow that incident life cycle. And very easily, from a dispatcher's perspective, I don't have to know anything other than the facts of the incident, right? Very simple for me as a dispatcher, and that's really an important point that I like to make here. Now, just to give you a little bit of flavor of what this looks like on the back end, change my role here. So let's start with our power outage. So this is where I've developed my, sorry, wrong one. There we go. All right, my incident templates. So first I said, well, what do I want my message lifecycle to look like for my customer population? So that's what this template is for. And when it's a new incident, when it's a brand new incident, I just want to say, I don't know what the problem is yet, but I just want to let people know that we're aware of a problem, but we don't have a lot of detail yet. So we just have a very basic message. Hey, we have an issue. We'll let you know when we have more information. And I build up my message. I have my people. In this case, I'm just sending email as an example, but this is where you can control not only the different messaging, but you might have the message delivered in different methods. Maybe management stakeholders only get emails, media gets text and phone calls, or something like that. So you have a lot of flexibility, not only in the content of the message, but in the delivery of the message as well. So that's very basic. When I'm updating my customers, I have a slightly different input. Now I just need to know how long do we think before it's going to be fixed, because I have a static message that says, thanks for your patience, we expect power to be restored in, whatever I typed in, right? So we can have our message, again, from a dispatcher perspective, in this particular case, to a customer update, the only thing we want them to decide is how long, and that's the input, right? So you can make it very, very simple for them. And then similarly on closed, again, we just have some details about it being, the issue being over. And if we look at these other templates, you can see a lot of similarity in that. Right here I have my employees. This is where we might be calling out, all right, linemen or technicians or whatever you might call them. We think we have about 1,000 people. This happened, go figure out what the problem is. Right, very simple. When we're updating them, we're saying, okay, we've discovered what the problem is. Here's what it is. This might be something where this gets sent to management. Maybe the linemen probably don't need to know what the problem is because they're the ones that figured it out. But you might want to send this to stakeholders or something like that internally and let them know they've discovered the problem and here's what it was, because they might be fielding media inquiries perhaps or something like that. Right, and then on closed, here's some notes about a resolution. Right, and then I realized this is very simple, but again, I did that on purpose, is to not overwhelm people with 40 new buttons and switches to mess with. What's beautiful about this is this allows you a lot of flexibility to really tailor these messages just the way you want them to be. Not only from a structure perspective, right? What do I want my message to look like, perhaps? And you could do that anyway. But also then for each audience and perhaps each different phase for each audience, how variable or wide open do you want the message to be? I want, in this example, I only have one thing I want you to press to enter in. Maybe you have 5 or 6 things, right? And you can have a lot of flexibility in how much or how little data you want to gather to drive this messaging. Now, hopefully that will cause more questions than it answered. But that's kind of the basics around the incident templates from that perspective. Now, the scenario part itself is really very simple. We have scenarios here. And this is just a case where you're going to make a scenario or a container. I called mine my utility power outage. And I'm going to choose which template's going to be part of this scenario. In this case, I have 3. You can have up to 40, believe it or not. So you could have up to 40 different incident templates get launched in a single scenario. So hopefully you'll find that to be enough. I can't imagine a situation where you would need more than 40, but never say never. So that's very simple to add that together. And the beauty of this is once you set up your templates, Everbridge decides, okay, well, what does that front-end operator's form need to look like? You don't have to decide or worry about which variables on which template or anything like that. We put it all together so that when you launch that, it gives you a unified view. Here are the 6 or 3, or in the case of a power outage, 3 pieces of information for this scenario. You don't have to worry about which is on which template or anything like that. Right? All in keeping the experience very simple for the dispatcher. All right, so those are all the big points I wanted to talk about. I know we're going to get to Q&A in just a minute. I want to make sure we have plenty of time for that. So, Michael, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, I think we'll be good to move on to the next section. I'm going to hand you back the power in just a minute, Mike. But I'm just going to quickly. We have some new customers on. We have some veterans as well, but also we do have some people looking at Everbridge for the first time, and a scenario manager in particular. So I want to make sure just to give them a quick overview. So for those of you who are new to Everbridge, and this I guess will be a refresher to some of you seasoned Everbridge veterans, you know, Everbridge as a whole provides enterprise software applications to automate delivery and critical information to really keep people safe and businesses running. We have a variety of different use cases that we're used for. One of the coolest ones working for this company happened this past year for Super Bowl 50. We were used for as a keyword as an event opt-in tool for anyone visiting the city of San Francisco during that time, which is pretty cool. But we're also used for more severe incidents like terrorist attack or natural disasters such as a tornado. Across a variety of industries, we have 300 enterprise customers with 8 of the 10 largest cities, 24 of the 25 busiest airports. I won't go through them all, but we're also we're the only publicly traded company in this particular industry that we're in. Under EVBG. So one of the things I wanted to go over is the platform and really what that includes, and then the capabilities for it: assess, locate, automate, and communicate during incidents with our product suite and applications from safety connection, mass notification, IT alerting, which I know some of you on the line are using today. All of you who are customers are using, our base product mass notification, and some of you are using tools such as community engagement. And one of the things we wanted to, really stress for this webinar is the communication aspects. What should employees do, and where Everbridge differentiates itself is, our ability to understand that no single delivery path is ever 100% reliable, which is why we offer multimodal communications, and that's why it's important. When using Scenario Manager, what it allows you to do is really automate all these little intricacies for these incidents where you can't just simply blast out a message via voice or text. You need to be able to simultaneously send it to multiple devices and to these multiple groups. So with that being said, I want to move it over to the Q&A function. I just wanted to quickly go through those slides, but at this time I know we have a couple questions. So as a reminder, as you can see on the screen, if you want to ask a question during this time, please do so by submitting your question in the questions dropdown and submitting it to all panelists. So with that being said, I'm going to begin, and let me hand it over to you, Mike, just in case we have any in-product questions. Sure. So the first question that comes up, Mike, is can Scenario Manager generate after-action reports?
So yeah, so it's not Scenario Manager necessarily, but just incidents, generally speaking, whether they're scenarios or not. So here's my utility outage we talked about earlier. Right, we have a lot going on here. Lots of different messages were sent, different people, different messages, right, and all of that. So one of the things you could do here, of course, is if you have this information, if you wanted to look at individual broadcasts, for example, But what's probably more useful, and you can do this at any time, it doesn't have to be when it's closed, is you can click here and get an incident summary report. And what this gives you is this really nice PDF of all the detail around this particular incident. So here, this message was sent, here's the people it was sent to, here's what was said, and then a few minutes later we sent a new message, and of course there's lots of people on here. So that's one example of a report you might use if you want the nitty-gritty detail behind things like who was contacted and when and what time and all of that, right? That's fairly detailed, but this does a pretty good job of summarizing that in a nice PDF. Now, of course, you can make your own reports if you want something that maybe a little less detailed. And there's a couple of different ways you could look at that from a reporting perspective, right? We want to say, well, show me scenarios versus incidents, because you might want to make a distinction between the two. So for incident scenarios, I want to report on, let's see what the name was, and I want to see what the title of the message was, or something like that, depending on what you're looking for here. But this is just an example of, you're going to drag and drop the fields that you want to see in your report. Maybe you want to filter, maybe you don't. Maybe you want where the scenario name contains, power, as an example, and this is a very simple example. So here we have a summary of each individual incident from this particular scenario. And hopefully that makes sense. Now, and then you can just tailor this as far as what columns of data do you want to see. So there's the scenario if you want a little more high-level view of what's going on, like how many power outage scenarios did we launch? Maybe that's a higher-level report. You, of course, can go deeper and say, well, no, I want the notification detail for a particular scenario. Right, contains power or something like that. And then put a little more detail on the last 3 months from this day to this day, or something like that. So this really gives you a lot of power in defining, right, what data do you want to get out of Everbridge for your report? Do I want that just a PDF summary? Do I want a really nitty-gritty detailed spreadsheet? In this case, maybe you could build something like that here. Do I want a summary? So you have a lot of flexibility there as far as reporting. It's also worth mentioning, and I didn't mention it because it's not a scenario-specific feature, but in an incident, there's also a journal. So in addition to your notifications that are being sent out, there's a journal down here for just literally for keeping notes, right? Anything you put in here is not sent in any notification, right? It's just internal. But this is useful just to keep notes about what's going on as the incident's progressing. Maybe the incident spans a shift change. So I'm going to leave some notes for the next shift about, yes, I've sent this, the media is aware, and so on and things like that. It just allows you to have a scratch pad of what you've been doing as far as the incident goes. And that is also part of that summary up here would be on that report as well. So that can be useful from a sort of a note-taking perspective.
Awesome. So thank you, Mike. The next question that we have, it's from Ben in the audience, and he wants to know. So his question is, and I think I can answer the first part with a follow-up question to you, Mike. Has any discussion occurred about having incident templates that can only be used in scenarios and not kicked off individually? I think what he's asking is, and Ben, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, but I think what he's asking is, can you basically restrict other users from seeing those incident templates so they're only, they're not kicked off individually, but they're only used in, a specific scenario? Is that doable in Scenario Manager or with Everbridge?
Yeah. So they have to use the scenario exactly, and so I'll just. Because I like to show you how easy it is. I'll just change my role around, save a change there, and go back to my dispatcher role that I was using earlier. And now I only see the scenario, so I have to use them. I cannot launch things individually, right? And that's just a role configuration depending on how much or how little you want to give people access to. So yes, you can absolutely control that and say you must use the scenario in this case.
Awesome. So the next question is from Robert in the audience. He wants to know, are you able to create scenarios for natural gas incidents?
Well, absolutely you could. Really, and maybe to give you an idea, let me change my role again. Scenarios and incident communications in general is used in a lot of different ways. And so just to give you an idea, and these are just all demonstration templates, but just as an example, we have everything from water to power outages to IT incidents to police to fire to mall security, right? There's lots and lots and lots of different ways that this gets used. And you, of course, could create a scenario for natural gas or hazmat or really anything you can think of. And because the idea is you create a template, assuming, well, you're going to want to use scenarios, I'm assuming, because you have different messages you want to go to different people, right? That's kind of the idea. So you say, so for a natural gas incident, I want this type of message to go to my customers. So you will go and you would create that template and just figure out, okay, if I'm going to tell my customers about a natural gas incident, what do I need to tell them? What are the variable pieces that the dispatcher is going to provide at the time, and build that template out. Now, I don't have a natural gas template in this case, but this is where, this is, again, very, very simple one. But you could absolutely model this after really any kind of incident that you could ever want to come up with. Alien invasion, meteor strike, it could all be done.
Excellent. So, Mike, another question that Robert had in the audience was, excuse me, what happens if you said, a problem is going to take 3 hours to fix, and unfortunately it's going to take longer? Are you able to add in another message? Can you do that on the fly?
Absolutely, and I guess that's one thing I did gloss over perhaps a little bit. So let me just open up a new one here just to get another one going. So we said, hey, we have a new problem. We're going to send an update, like you said. We think we'll fix it in 4 hours, or whatever the number is. So I've said we'll pretend there's some time in between these messages. So here's a problem. Okay, we found the problem. We think it'll take 4 hours. Oh shoot, it's actually going to take 8 hours. Well, I need to send another update, and I think it's going to take 8 hours. And for the extra time, but it will take longer or whatever, right? The point is you might send multiple updates. It's not one new, one update, one closed. It's one new, as many updates as you need, and then one closed. So, oh, sorry, it's actually going to take 8 hours now instead of 4, and I can send that an additional update out. So you still have that flexibility to make amendments, right, to that initial update, perhaps. So the short answer is yes.
Awesome. So, Mike, the next question is from Ben. He wants to know, is there an ability to have a sequence scenario? For example, template 1 must complete before, and you have to acknowledge its completion in the scenario before it will move to template 2?
That is not something that's in place today, although that's not the first time I've heard that idea. But that is not something that's in place today, where it had that sequence where, yeah, I think if I understand you, it's send out a message to say, technicians, let's talk generically for a moment, send out a message to technicians, and once they've said, we're complete with our analysis or something like that, then send the message to customers or something like that. I'm guessing that's what you mean by that. I do like that idea. That is not something that the tool currently does today.
So I guess a follow-up question we had that was asked was, so how do the individual templates get launched within Scenario Manager after you initiate the first one?
So they get more or less at the same time, right? That you see when I hit new, these were exactly the same time, 11:32 and 26 seconds. So they are. I'm sure internally there's some sequence they go in, but ultimately, from your perspective, they get launched all at the same time. Right, so there really is no sequence to them. I'm not really sure where you were going with that.
So that was the last question, and we're actually 5 minutes over our half-hour mark. So I want to thank everyone who's joined us today, including Mike Wallach for joining us today, and all of our customers and people who were seeing Everbridge for the first time. I want to thank you for participating today. If you have any additional questions, feel free to reply to the email that was sent to you with the links, or you can email marketing. We can forward the questions over. The best email is marketing@everbridge.com. The recording and slides will be sent directly to everyone who is registered. So if you came on late or if you had a colleague who dropped off early, they will be emailed to anyone who has registered. Again, thank you everyone joining, and we look forward to seeing you all online again sometime soon. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.